In the sweltering summer of 1974, when Louisville's air hung heavy with both heat and history, 18-year-old Sarah Mitchell stood outside Cassius Clay Boxing Gym, her heart pounding harder than any fist against a heavy bag. The iconic red brick building represented everything she couldn't have. A dream society insisted wasn't hers to claim. 3 times this week, she'd been turned away. 3 times. She'd heard the same words. "Boxing isn't for women, sweetheart." Sarah's fingers traced the outline of her father's boxing gloves in her backpack. They were worn from years of use, the leather cracked and faded. But to her, they were worth more than any diamond or investment portfolio. Her father had been a promising middleweight before his accident, before the drunk driver had taken both his career and his life, leaving behind only memories, medical bills, and these gloves. Inside the gym, through windows clouded with decades of sweat and determination, she could see them, men dancing across the canvas, their movements both violent and beautiful. Among them stood a man whose presence seemed to fill the room, whose voice carried even through the thick glass. Muhammad Ali, the people's champion, recently returned to his hometown. "You can stare all day, but they ain't gonna let you win," said a voice behind her. Sarah turned to find an elderly black man in a janitor's uniform, keys jingling at his waist as he swept the sidewalk. His name tag read Walter. "I don't just want to watch," Sarah replied, straightening her shoulders. "I want to fight." Walter's laugh lines deepened. "Girl, you've got more chance of opening a bank account on Mars than getting through that front door to train." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Then I'll find another way in." Walter studied her for a long moment, his expression shifting from amusement to something else. Recognition, perhaps. The kind that comes from seeing your own fire reflected in someone else's eyes. "Back door opens at 5 tomorrow morning," he said quietly. "I start cleaning before anyone arrives. Might forget to lock it behind me." He paused. "But if you're serious, you better bring more than just determination. This ain't no health insurance. You get hurt in there without permission. That's on you." For the first time that day, Sarah smiled. "I'll be there." That night, in her tiny apartment above the diner where she worked double shifts, Sarah practiced her footwork in the narrow space between her bed and the window. The digital alarm clock on her nightstand, a splurge from her first paycheck, read 1:17 a.m. Outside, the occasional car drove past, headlights briefly illuminating her makeshift training space. On her wall hung a single photograph, her father in the ring, gloves raised in victory, his face split with a smile that mirrored her own. "I'm going to make it, Dad," she whispered. "I'll find a way." Sarah knew the odds were stacked against her, not just as a woman in a man's sport, but as someone with nothing but $37 in her emergency fund and a high school diploma in a world that demanded more. But tomorrow, she would step through that back door, and nothing would ever be the same. If this story has already made you feel something, however small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from, and subscribe to the channel. Dawn broke over Louisville like a promise. Sarah arrived at the gym's back entrance at 4:45, wearing her father's gloves and carrying a small gym bag with a water bottle and hand wraps. Walter was already there, key in the lock. "Thought you might chicken out," he said, but his eyes approved of her punctuality. "Not a chance," Sarah replied, following him into the dimly lit building. The gym smelled of leather, sweat, and disinfectant, scents that instantly felt like home. Walter flipped on just enough lights for them to see. "You've got 1 hour before the early birds show up," he said, handing her a jump rope. "Show me what you've got." For the next hour, Sarah trained harder than she ever had before. She jumped the rope until her calves burned, shadowboxed until sweat drenched her t-shirt, and hit the speed bag with growing precision. Walter watched silently, occasionally correcting her form with a gruff word or gesture. "You've done this before," he finally said. It wasn't a question. "My dad taught me," Sarah replied between breaths. "Until I was 16. Then he died." Walter nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Well, your daddy taught you good fundamentals. but you're still telegraphing your right cross. The back door opened suddenly, and Sarah froze mid-punch. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the morning light, and for one terrifying moment she thought she'd been caught. Then the figure stepped forward, and her heart nearly stopped. Muhammad Ali himself stood before her, dressed in running gear, a light sheen of sweat on his brow from his morning road work. His eyes, playful yet penetrating, moved from Walter to Sarah and back again. "Walter," he said, his voice surprisingly soft for such a large man. "You starting a private coaching business I don't know about?" "Just helping out," Walter replied cautiously. "Ah, she's got potential." Ali's gaze returned to Sarah, taking in her stance, her wrapped hands, her father's oversized gloves. "What's your name, girl?" "Sarah Mitchell," she managed, her voice steadier than her nerves. "And why are you in my gym at 5 in the morning when they don't allow women boxers?" Sarah swallowed hard. This was it, her one chance. "Because I don't need their permission to be what I'm meant to be. I need training. Real training. And I'll do whatever it takes to get it." A slow smile spread across Ali's face. Strong words. But in this ring, he gestured to the boxing ring dominating the center of the gym. Words don't mean a thing, only actions. He moved to a nearby equipment rack and picked up a pair of focus mitts, slipping them onto his hands with practiced ease. Then he climbed into the ring and beckoned to her. "Let's see if those hands can cash the check your mouth just wrote." Sarah looked at Walter, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. With trembling hands, she climbed through the ropes and faced the greatest boxer in the world. "Hit me," Ali said, raising the mitts. "And don't hold back. I want to see what Walter sees in you." For the next 15 minutes, Sarah threw every punch she knew, putting all her grief, determination, and dreams behind each one. Ali moved with an effortless grace, calling out combinations, testing her reflexes, pushing her to her limits. Jab, cross, hook. Faster, slip the right, now counter. By the end, Sarah's arms felt like lead, and her lungs burned with each breath. Ali lowered the mitts and studied her with new interest. "You've got heart," he said finally, "and some raw talent. But heart and talent only get you so far. This sport requires discipline, strategy, and intelligence." He paused. "Plus, if they catch you in here, we'll all be in trouble." Sarah's heart sank. After coming this close, would she be turned away again? "I tell you what," Ali continued, surprising her. "I run at Chickasaw Park every morning at 5. Public place. Can't stop anyone from running the same route." His eyes twinkled with the mischief that had made him as famous as his fighting. "Why, and if I happen to carry some boxing equipment, and someone happens to train with me after our run, well, that's nobody's business but ours." Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You'd train me. But why?" Ali's expression grew serious. "Because 20 years ago, I was told I couldn't be what I wanted to be, too. Different reasons. Same result." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "They'll always find reasons to say no. Our job is to keep saying yes." As the sounds of arriving trainers echoed from the front of the gym, Walter quickly ushered Sarah toward the back exit. Before she left, Ali called after her, "Chickasaw Park, tomorrow, 5 a.m. sharp, don't be late." Sarah nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. As she slipped out the back door into the alley, clutching her bag to her chest, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. The diner where she worked was already filling with the breakfast crowd when she arrived, still flushed from her encounter with Ali. Her manager, a harried woman with permanently furrowed brows, glanced at her disheveled appearance. "You look like you just ran a marathon. Everything okay?" Sarah tied her apron with shaking hands. "Everything's perfect. I've got a chance at something big." The morning passed in a blur as Sarah took orders, refilled coffee cups, and calculated tips. Among her regular customers was Dr. Eleanor Hayes, a cardiologist at the private hospital downtown, who always ordered the same thing: egg whites, dry toast, and black coffee. "You seem different today, Sarah," Dr. Hayes observed, signing her credit card receipt. Like you found a new purpose. Sarah hesitated, then leaned in. Can I ask you something? When you decided to become a doctor, did people tell you it wasn't for women? Dr. Hayes's professional smile faltered. Every day. My own father cut off my college fund when I chose medicine over teaching. She tapped her executive health planner thoughtfully. But here I am, 20 years later, heading my department. Why do you ask? I'm pursuing something unconventional, Sarah replied carefully. Whatever it is, Dr. Hayes said, gathering her designer handbag. Remember that pioneering women don't ask for permission. We create precedents. She pressed a business card into Sarah's hand. If you ever need medical advice, or just someone who understands climbing uphill battles, call my private line. As Dr. Hayes left, Sarah tucked the card into her pocket, another unexpected ally in her corner. That night, Sarah set 2 alarms and laid out her running clothes. Tomorrow, her real training would begin. Tomorrow, she would start becoming the fighter she was meant to be, with the greatest of all time as her secret mentor. Chickasaw Park at 5 in the morning was a different world, misty, quiet, and primordial. Sarah arrived 10 minutes early, her breath visible in the pre-dawn chill, her muscles still aching from yesterday's impromptu training session. She wore her only pair of running shoes, purchased second-hand but meticulously cleaned. For several anxious minutes, she stood alone on the path, doubt creeping in. Had Allie been serious? Or was this some kind of joke at her expense? Just as she was about to give up, a figure emerged from the fog, tall, powerful, unmistakable. Right on time, Muhammad Ali said with approval. Without another word, he took off at a steady jog. Sarah fell in beside him, matching his pace. For the first mile, they ran in silence, the only sounds their rhythmic breathing and the soft thud of their footfalls on the path. The park was their private domain, the early hour ensuring they had it almost entirely to themselves. Occasionally, a lone fisherman or early birdwatcher would do a double take as the famous boxer and his unknown female companion passed by. First lesson, Ali finally said, his breathing controlled despite their pace. Boxing isn't just about throwing punches, it's about conditioning, mental toughness, being able to think clearly when your body is screaming for rest. Sarah nodded, saving her breath for running. The 5 miles they covered felt like 50 to her untrained legs, but she refused to show weakness. When they finally circled back to their starting point, Ali led her to a secluded area beneath a canopy of oak trees. From his gym bag, he produced a pair of focus mitts, hand wraps, and a mouthguard. Now the real work begins. For the next hour, Ali drilled Sarah on the fundamentals, proper stance, balance, the mechanics of a true punch thrown from the feet up. He was demanding but patient, pushing her to her limits while teaching her to respect them. Power comes from proper technique, not just strength, he explained, adjusting her elbow. And technique comes from repetition, thousands and thousands of repetitions. By the end of the session, Sarah's t-shirt was soaked through, and her arms trembled with fatigue. But she had never felt more alive. Same time tomorrow, Ali asked, though it wasn't really a question. I'll be here, Sarah promised. And she was, the next day, and the day after that, and every day for weeks. Their routine became sacred. 5 miles of running, followed by increasingly complex boxing drills. Ali taught her not just how to throw punches, but how to move, how to anticipate, how to see openings before they fully developed. You're fighting ghosts out there, he told her one morning as she shadowboxed. Make them real in your mind. See their counters before they throw them. Sarah's body transformed under the rigorous training. Her soft edges hardened into lean muscle. Her once awkward movements became fluid, purposeful. At the diner, customers noticed the change in her physique, her posture, her confidence. You joined some kind of fitness program? Her manager asked one afternoon, watching Sarah easily carry a tray loaded with plates. Something like that, Sarah replied with a small smile. The truth was their secret, hers and Ali's. In a world that told women where they belonged, Sarah was carving out a space where only skill and determination mattered. And Ali, who had fought his own battles against prejudice and expectation, became more than a coach. He became her mentor, her confidant, her friend. One rainy morning, when the park was deserted and the mist hung low like a protective curtain, Ali brought a sparring partner, a young lightweight from his gym named Marcus. Time to test what you've learned against a real opponent, Ali announced. Marcus looked uncertain. Coach, I can't hit a girl. Ali's eyes narrowed. You're not hitting a girl. You're sparring with a boxer. And if you hold back, she'll make you regret it. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude at Ali's words, at the simple dignity of being seen as an athlete first, a woman second. The sparring session was eye-opening. Marcus was skilled and fast, and despite Ali's warning, he clearly pulled his punches at first. Sarah, determined to prove herself, pressed forward aggressively, too aggressively. A quick counter caught her off guard, sending her stumbling backward. Balance, Ali called from the sidelines. Remember your fundamentals. Sarah regrouped, this time approaching with more caution. She began to see the patterns in Marcus's movement, the slight tells before his jab, the way he dropped his right hand after throwing a hook. Gradually, she found her rhythm, landing clean shots that clearly surprised her opponent. By the end of 3 rounds, Marcus was no longer holding back, and Sarah was holding her own. When they touched gloves at the final bell, there was newfound respect in his eyes. You've got some skills, he admitted. For real. Ali nodded with satisfaction. She's a natural counterpuncher. Reminds me of me at that age, except without all the talking. He winked at Sarah. As Marcus packed up his gear, Ali pulled Sarah aside. You're ready for the next step. It's time to get you some real matches. Sarah's pulse quickened. But where? No official boxing commission will sanction a woman. Leave that to me, Ali replied with a mysterious smile. There's more than one way to make history. That evening, Sarah returned to her apartment to find an unexpected package waiting for her. Inside was a brand new pair of professional boxing gloves, along with a handwritten note, for the next phase of your journey, M. The gloves were top of the line, the kind professional fighters used in championship bouts. Sarah held them reverently, running her fingers over the supple leather. These weren't just equipment, they were a vote of confidence from the greatest boxer who ever lived. She placed them carefully beside her father's old gloves on her nightstand, the past and future of her boxing journey side by side. Tomorrow, whatever Ali had planned, she would be ready. What she couldn't have known was that Ali's plan would catapult her into an underground boxing circuit that operated beyond the rules of the official commissions, a place where gender mattered less than skill, where fighters were judged by their heart rather than their background. And it was here, in converted warehouses and hidden gym basements, that Sarah Mitchell would begin to make her mark. As she drifted off to sleep that night, her mind was filled not with doubts but with possibilities. The journey ahead would be challenging, perhaps even dangerous, but with Ali in her corner, she believed she could face whatever came next. After all, as the champ himself had told her, impossible is nothing but a word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it. The warehouse stood in Louisville's industrial district, its windows blacked out, its exterior unremarkable except for a small red light above a steel door. Sarah followed Ali through a labyrinth of alleys to reach it, her new gloves tucked securely in her gym bag, her heart racing with anticipation. What is this place? She asked as Ali knocked a specific pattern on the door. Let's call it an alternative venue for alternative fighters, he replied cryptically. A people who don't fit the establishment's idea of what a boxer should be. The door opened to reveal a mountain of a man with a close-cropped beard and arms thick as tree trunks. His eyes widened at the sight of Ali. The champ himself, he said with reverence, stepping aside. And who's this? My new prospect. Allie answered simply. She's here to fight. The doorman's eyebrows shot up, but he merely nodded and gestured them inside. Max is running the card tonight. You'll find him by the ring. Inside, the warehouse had been transformed into a makeshift arena. A regulation boxing ring stood in the center, surrounded by folding chairs and standing room. The space buzzed with energy. Fighters warming up, trainers giving last-minute instructions, spectators placing bets with a sharp-dressed man whose digital calculator worked overtime. Sarah took it all in with wide eyes. This was boxing stripped to its essence. Raw, unfiltered, electric. No television cameras, no corporate sponsors, just the ancient art of pugilism in its purest form. Ali led her to a compact, muscular man with salt and pepper hair who was reviewing bout sheets on a clipboard. Max, Ali greeted him. Got room for one more on your card tonight? Max looked up, recognition and respect flashing across his features. For you, champ? Always. His gaze shifted to Sarah, skeptical but curious. This your fighter? Sarah Mitchell. Ali introduced her. 135 pounds, trained by yours truly. Max whistled low. A female boxer, that's a first, even for this place. He studied Sarah with the calculating eye of someone who'd seen countless fighters come and go. Who would she fight? I don't have any women on the roster. Whoever you've got in her weight class, Ali replied confidently. Gender doesn't matter when the bell rings. Max hesitated, clearly weighing the novelty against the risk, the insurance liability alone. I'll sign whatever you need, Sarah interjected, stepping forward. I'm not asking for special treatment, just a chance. Something in her demeanor must have convinced him, because Max nodded slowly. All right. I've got a fighter who just lost his opponent to a no-show. Carson Reed, 138 pounds, 3-1 record here. Nothing fancy, but solid fundamentals. He fixed Sarah with a serious look. This isn't an exhibition, you understand. No headgear, regular rules. He won't hold back because you're a woman. Good, Sarah replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Neither will I. As Max went to make the arrangements, Ali guided Sarah to a quiet corner to warm up. Carson's a counterpuncher, he advised as she stretched. Patient waits for openings. Don't give him any. Pressure him early, but smart pressure. Don't waste energy. Sarah nodded, absorbing every word as she wrapped her hands with the careful precision Ali had taught her. A strange calm had settled over her, the calm of someone who had finally arrived where they were meant to be. When her name was called, Sarah stepped toward the ring with Ali behind her. The crowd, initially engaged in various conversations, gradually fell silent as they noticed the unexpected sight. A woman in boxing gloves, headed for the ring, with Muhammad Ali himself in her corner. Whispers rippled through the audience. Some laughed. Others exchanged worried glances. A few leaned forward with genuine interest. Her opponent, Carson, was already in the ring, a wiry, athletic man with a boxer's flat nose and cauliflower ears. He did a double-take as Sarah climbed through the ropes, looking to his corner man with confusion. The referee, a weathered veteran with a seen-it-all expression, called both fighters to center ring. Clean fight, no low blows, no rabbit punches. Protect yourselves at all times. He looked between them. Any questions? Carson shifted uncomfortably. I don't know about this, ref. You worried? Sarah asked, unable to resist. The question stung his pride, as she'd intended. Carson's jaw set stubbornly. Your funeral, lady. They touched gloves and returned to their corners. Ali gave Sarah a final piece of advice. First round, he'll either come at you hard to end it quick, or he'll be too hesitant because you're a woman. Either way, use it against him. The bell rang, and Sarah stepped into the center of the ring, her guard high, her eyes locked on Carson. For a moment, they circled each other cautiously. Then Carson, perhaps deciding to end this unusual match quickly, launched a flurry of punches. Sarah had expected this. She slipped the first, blocked the second, and countered with a sharp right cross that landed flush on Carson's jaw. The impact sent a shock through her glove and up her arm, the first real punch she'd landed on an opponent who wasn't holding back. Carson stumbled backward, surprise evident on his face. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some shouting in disbelief. Sarah didn't let the moment overwhelm her. She pressed forward, just as Ali had taught her, cutting off the ring, forcing Carson to engage on her terms. The first round was a revelation, not just to the spectators, but to Sarah herself. The months of training with Ali, the countless repetitions, the endless road work, it all culminated in these 3 minutes of controlled chaos. She wasn't just surviving, she was competing. When the bell rang, she returned to her corner with newfound confidence. "Beautiful," Ali told her as he pressed an ice pack to the back of her neck. "But he's adjusting already. See how he's starting to time your jab. You need to mix it up this round. Change levels, work the body." Sarah nodded, catching her breath. Across the ring, Carson was receiving similar instructions, his initial shock replaced by grim determination. He wasn't underestimating her anymore. The second round was harder. Carson came in more strategically, using his slight weight advantage to push Sarah back when they clinched. She absorbed a hard right that momentarily buzzed her senses, but recovered quickly, countering with combinations that kept him honest. By the third and final round, the exhibition aspect of the match had completely disappeared. They were simply two fighters testing their skills against each other, gender irrelevant in the crucible of combat. Sarah's left eye was swelling from a clean hook Carson had landed, while his nose trickled blood from her straight right. In the final minute, with both fighters fatigued but determined, Sarah found the opening Ali had prepared her for. Carson dropped his right hand slightly after throwing his jab, a habit she'd noticed in the first round but hadn't been able to exploit until now. She feinted to draw out his jab, then slipped inside with a perfect left hook that connected squarely on his temple. Carson's knees buckled. He stumbled, caught himself on the ropes, and clinched desperately until the bell rang, saving him from a potential knockdown. When the referee raised Sarah's hand in victory, the warehouse erupted. What had begun as a curiosity had become a legitimately thrilling contest. Spectators who had scoffed were now standing, applauding both fighters for their heart and skill. As Sarah exited the ring, various figures approached her. Trainers, other fighters, even the bookie with his digital calculator. They offered congratulations, asked where she'd learned to fight, wondered if she'd be back. A local financial advisor handed her his business card, mentioning potential sponsorship opportunities once this women's boxing thing takes off. But the most meaningful reaction came from Carson himself, who pushed through the crowd to shake her hand. "On that left hook in the third," he said, touching his bruised temple. "Never saw it coming. You're the real deal." Sarah thanked him, then turned to find Ali watching her with a mixture of pride and something else, a knowing look that suggested this was just the beginning. "How does it feel?" he asked as they made their way out of the warehouse, the night air cool against her flushed skin. Sarah considered the question, touching her swollen eye gingerly. "Kinda like I've finally found where I belong." Ali nodded, understanding perfectly. That's how champions feel in the ring, like they've come home. He looked up at the stars, visible even through the city's lights. But this is just the first step, the real fight, the one to change the sport itself, that's still ahead. Sarah knew he was right. One underground fight wouldn't transform boxing's gender barriers. The road to legitimacy would be long and difficult, filled with opposition from the sport's gatekeepers. But for the first time, that future seemed possible, not just a distant dream. As they walked back toward the city center, Ali outlined his vision: more fights in the underground circuit to build her record and reputation. Documentation of her bouts to prove women could compete safely. Strategic pressure on boxing commissions through media contacts and political allies. A gradual, methodical campaign to change not just rules, but mindsets. It won't happen overnight, he cautioned. Maybe not even in time for your prime fighting years, but you'll be opening doors for those who come after you. Sarah thought about all the young girls who, like her, might be standing outside boxing gyms, told their dreams weren't appropriate for their gender. "I can live with that," she said. They paused at a street corner, where they would go their separate ways, Allie to his home in the city's affluent East End, Sarah to her modest apartment above the diner. "Ice that eye," Allie instructed. 20 minutes on, 20 off, and take tomorrow's training session easy. Light road work only. Sarah nodded. "Thank you," she said, the simple words inadequate for all he had done for her. Allie smiled, understanding the depth of her gratitude. "Don't thank me yet. We're just getting started." He turned to go, then added over his shoulder, "By the way, I've arranged for a sports medicine specialist to check that eye tomorrow. Dr. Hayes said you should call her private line in the morning." Sarah blinked in surprise. "Dr. Hayes, my regular at the diner?" "The very same," Allie confirmed with a wink. "Turns out the good doctor was quite the kickboxer in her college days. She's been following your progress more closely than you knew." He chuckled at Sarah's astonished expression. "Champions recognize each other, Sarah. Remember that." As Allie disappeared into the night, Sarah stood on the corner, her body aching, but her spirit soaring. The world of possibilities that had opened to her was dizzying. From secret dawn training sessions to underground fights to unexpected allies in high places, her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined, and it had all begun with a simple refusal to accept limitations, hers or the world's. With each new day, each new challenge overcome, Sarah Mitchell was writing her own definition of what a woman could be, what a fighter could achieve. The journey ahead would test her in ways she couldn't yet foresee. But tonight, with the taste of her first victory still fresh, Sarah Mitchell walked home with the confident stride of someone who had finally stepped into their purpose, someone who had found, at last, the courage to fight not just in the ring, but for her rightful place in a world that had tried to define her out of existence. The years that followed Sarah's first underground fight unfolded like a masterfully choreographed bout, moments of explosive progress interspersed with grueling tests of endurance. The path she and Allie had envisioned proved even more challenging than anticipated. Yet with each obstacle, Sarah's resolve only strengthened. By 1976, she had compiled an impressive underground record of 15 wins against only 2 losses. Her reputation grew beyond Louisville, drawing fighters and fans from neighboring states to witness Ali's female protégé. Articles began appearing in alternative sports publications, with titles like "The Woman Boxing Couldn't Keep Out" and "Fighting for More Than Victories." The diner where Sarah had once worked became a pilgrimage site for young women interested in boxing. She had long since quit to focus on training full-time, supported by a network of sponsors that Dr. Hayes had helped assemble, a women's health clinic, a progressive law firm specializing in equity cases, and even a startup tech company whose female CEO had been inspired by Sarah's story. One crisp autumn morning in 1977, Allie arrived at their training session with news that would change everything. The New York State Athletic Commission is holding hearings next month on amending their regulations, he announced as they stretched. They're considering sanctioning exhibition matches for female boxers. Sarah paused mid-stretch. Exhibition matches? Not professional bouts? It's a foot in the door, Allie replied. And I've arranged for you to testify. He handed her an airline ticket. First class. My personal investment in the future of the sport. The hearing in New York was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. A windowless room filled with stern-faced commissioners, medical experts with conflicting opinions, and journalists scribbling every word. When her name was called, Sarah approached the microphone with the same controlled confidence she brought to the ring. "Gentlemen," she began, looking each commissioner in the eye. "For 3 years, I have fought in unsanctioned bouts against male opponents. I have 15 wins. I have never been knocked out. I have never suffered a serious injury. The question isn't whether women can box, we already are boxing. The question is whether you will recognize our right to do so safely and legally." She presented her medical records, statements from her opponents, and video footage of her fights. Dr. Hayes testified as a medical expert on the physiological aspects of female boxing. Ali spoke last, his presence commanding the room's full attention. "I've trained champion after champion," he told the commission. "Men who defined eras in this sport, and I tell you without hesitation, Sarah Mitchell has the skill, the heart, and the right to compete professionally. Denying her is not protecting anyone, it's perpetuating an injustice." The commission's decision came 6 weeks later. Exhibition matches between female boxers would be sanctioned on a trial basis. It wasn't full professional status, but it was historic nonetheless. Sarah would face Jeanette Carter, a former karate champion from Philadelphia, in the first sanctioned female boxing match in New York State history. The media attention was immediate and overwhelming. Sarah found herself thrust into the spotlight, appearing on morning shows, giving newspaper interviews, and fielding questions that ranged from insightful to insulting. "Do you think women have the killer instinct necessary for boxing?" one reporter asked. "I think anyone who steps into a ring needs courage, intelligence, and discipline," Sarah replied evenly. "Gender has nothing to do with it." Another questioned, "Aren't you concerned about your marketability? Boxing damages the face, after all." Sarah's response was quoted in newspapers across the country. "I'm not fighting to be looked at, I'm fighting to be seen." The night of the historic bout, Madison Square Garden's smaller venue was filled to capacity. Network television cameras captured every moment. In the dressing room, as Ali wrapped her hands with the same care he'd shown that first morning in the gym, Sarah felt the weight of what was at stake. "I'm nervous," she admitted. "Not about the fight, about what it means." Ali finished the wrap and secured it with tape. Every fighter who ever changed the sport felt that weight. Joe Louis, Jack Johnson, me. He placed his hands on her shoulders. "But when that bell rings, let it all go. Fight for yourself, not for history. History will take care of itself." Jeanette Carter proved to be Sarah's toughest opponent yet. Quick, technically sound, with devastating counterpunches. For 6 grueling rounds, they showcased skills that silenced even the most skeptical observers. The crowd, initially drawn by curiosity, was soon on its feet, genuinely appreciating the high level of boxing on display. In the final round, with both women bloodied but unbowed, Sarah landed a combination that sent Carter reeling into the ropes. The referee initiated a standing 8 count, and when action resumed, Sarah continued her assault until the final bell. The judges' unanimous decision in Sarah's favor was almost secondary to what they had accomplished together. As the referee raised her hand, Sarah reached out with her free arm and raised Carter's as well, a gesture of solidarity that brought the arena to its feet. The exhibition's success led to more sanctioned matches. By 1979, New Jersey and California had followed New York's lead. Sports Illustrated featured Sarah on its cover with the headline, "The Fight for Equality, Boxing's New Frontier." A television executive approached her about hosting a fitness program focused on women's strength training. But the biggest breakthrough came in 1980, when the American Boxing Association announced it would recognize a women's division with full professional status. Sarah Mitchell would fight Lucia Rijker of the Netherlands for the first officially sanctioned Women's World Championship. On the night before this career-defining bout, Sarah visited Ali at his home. His health had begun to show subtle signs of decline, though his mind remained sharp and his spirit undiminished. They sat on his porch, watching the sunset as they had so many times after training sessions. "Did you ever imagine we'd get this far?" Sarah asked. Ali smiled, his movements slightly slower than they once were. "I didn't just imagine it, I expected it." He turned to her, his eyes still bright with the same intelligence that had made him not just a fighter, but a revolutionary. Champions don't just accept the world as it is. They remake it into what it should be. The next evening, as Sarah stood in the center of the ring, the belt held high above her head after 8 rounds of the most technical, demanding boxing of her career, she caught Ali's eye at ringside. His proud smile told her what she already knew. This victory belonged not just to her, but to every woman who had ever been told to limit her dreams. In her post-fight interview, the reporter asked what message she had for young girls watching. Sarah, her face swollen but radiant with triumph, looked directly into the camera. The same message Muhammad Ali gave me when everyone said I couldn't be a boxer. They'll always find reasons to say no. Your job is to keep saying yes. If you've made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing. I tell these stories with my heart in my hand, to reach people like you, who feel, who get emotional, who live. If this truly touched you, give back, comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video. In the years that followed, women's boxing grew steadily, with Sarah at its forefront, first as a champion, then as a trainer, and finally as a commissioner herself, ensuring the path she had pioneered would remain open for generations to come. The little gym in Louisville where it all began eventually erected a plaque commemorating the site where Sarah Mitchell trained with Muhammad Ali and changed boxing forever. Beside it hung a photograph of them at Chickasaw Park, teacher and student, legend and pioneer, two fighters who had refused to let the world define their limitations. And on quiet mornings, decades later, when a young girl might stand outside that gym, wondering if there was a place for her inside, she would find not a locked door, but a welcome sign. And perhaps, if she was fortunate, an aging woman with fighter's hands and knowing eyes, ready to wrap those small fists and teach her the first lesson Ali had taught Sarah so many years before. Champions aren't born. They're made, one defiant yes at a time.